What Gemara, today's daf is daf Zayin. So the last thing we learned was that the halacha regarding collecting from a goy a loan. He made a distinction between if it's a loan on a star, then you shouldn't collect it because he's always scared that you'll pull out the star. So when he pays it off, he's happy. We don't want to make him happy. But for a milvad pay, if he's ready to pay, take the money, and also he's not so worried, and so on. The second thing we said was halacha like Rabbi Yehuda regarding the argument if somebody takes wool and changes it from red to black, or from a dye, or from black to red. So according to Rabbi, you're a ganef, and shini is kaina, and therefore you pay whatever the original wool cost was. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you're not a ganef, because even though shini is kaina, Rabbi Yehuda hold, but not in this case because you had no intention. But it's like you I guess added value, but you had no right to. So whatever is lesser, the profit or the expense. Interesting, we give two examples, red to black or black to red. It's the same thing. Why you give two examples? Because there's some Achreinim say that black is really red. If you ever see a hat, it rains a lot, you see the red dye coming down. Red is really, black is really deep red. So we would have thought that if you took a red, you told you to make it red, and you made it black, maybe it's not so much of a shinui, because black really is red, just a much darker version of red. Says that may know, and that's when it's considered a shini. And and black to red, which is a major shini, and that's to tell you that even then Rabbi Yehuda is not a shini. Let's continue the Gemara. So what happened was after he said this, that Allah like Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef sat there, and Hadrinu Rabbi Yosef turned around, showing a face of anger. Rabbi Yosef already told us in Sechta Arab Sachim all the deficiencies that people have, and he said he had all three of them. And one of them is an anger. He had a temper. Of course you need halacha. Tell me halacha. I would have thought Yachim would have halacha. He's a lone opinion. In that case, halacha like him. What do you tell me that halacha like Rabbi Yehuda Pshita? This is obvious. The machlek is v'achar stam. We have a general rule. If you have a mishnah which brings you two opinions, then later on there's another mishnah which is anonymous and it brings you only one of the opinions. Obviously, Rebbe is saying that's the halacha. No, the machlek is above Kama, and there's a stam above Matzia, which is the following Masechta. Now we learned in a mishnah there. Kol hamishana yode ala tachtoina. There's a mishnah that talks about it for an employee who changes his mind in the middle. So it says so it throws in there anybody who changes from what their order was yode al tachtoina, he gets the lesser amount, the profit or the expense. Anybody who changes their mind also loses out and they get the lesser amount. One second, wait. But Abhuna, they ain't say the Mishnah. Abhuna says no. Here, there's no seder from one Masechta to another Masechta, and therefore he had to tell you that Allah like Abhuna. You don't know. Maybe the Mishnah that was Stam was actually written first, and the Mishnah which is Machlek written later. We don't know which is first, which is second. So call Machlek Lay may say the Mishnah. How can you ever have this rule? A Machlek and afterwards Stam, we follow Stam. I know which is further. But Abhuna. It's a double negative. When don't we say ein seder? When don't we say there's no seder? When do we say there is a seder b'chad masechta in one masechta? In one masechta, definitely is an order and there's a sequence, and therefore this first is a machlekes and afterwards is a stam. That means that's halacha. Aber b'trei masechta amrina. If it's two separate masechtas, we do say that there's no order. And Rabbi Yosef. Kula zikin chad masechta. The Tanya zikin is one masechta. There is interesting. The word gone. No, Baba Kamba, Baba Tzira Basa, just three sections, three parts of one book, of one Masechta. The word gone equals 60. They say the reason why a gone is called a gone is because he's a Baki B'Shas. And he knows the 60 Masechtas there are, including the Mishnais. Now, the truth of the matter is that's 63. So some say that's 61. If you say Kul Nuziga Chad Masechta, how do you get to 60? So there is another view that Masechta Makkis is really part of the Babas as well. And therefore, or Makkos is part of one of the other Masechtas, and they are Sanhedrin. So therefore, we say that there's a total of 60 Masechtas. But interesting, Rabbi Yosef holds that's one with the Kozi Chol Masechta. Rabbi Abbas holds it's not. So what's he frowning upon it for? So someone else has a different view than you. I guess it happens. People have different views. You get angry with them. Another answer is Mishum Victoria law. This this insert, this clause called Hamashana, Yodel Tachtoine, if you change those if red color red to black, Yodel Tachtoine has nothing to do, there's no place in that mission at all. It's Gabi Hilchas Psikta. The only reason why we've been put into that mission is to tell you a halacha, not just the interesting of view. The subject matter is if you have charata. Then you throw in if a guy changes, unilaterally. It's totally outside the purview of the Mishnah. The reason why it's put into there must be because that's the halacha. So that is different, and that's what when it says halacha is like that Mishnah, like a Yehuda. Now that you mentioned the halacha of Shurma Karcha, we'll bring a few other situations of Shurma Karcha argues the Chachamim. We learned on Shabbos, now that I prepared for Motzei Shabbos, now the high somebody in Shabbos, Motzei Shabbos, Mimcha Chevcha, V'da, the things which are not Shabbosdik. What about saying to a person, maybe we'll see each other tonight again, talking about beginning of work, saying, maybe we'll see each other tonight again. A person should not say to his friend, Hanida, will we see? Will you stand next to me tonight? Rabbi Yeshua you can say that. And here's another example where we bring the halacha of Shema Karcha, even though it's he's a lone opinion against the Chachamim. You talk about Shabbos. You say on Shabbos afternoon, Hanida, will I see you? Will I see you tonight? You didn't formally hire the person. You alluded to that. We're learning now. We said yesterday Allah Shur and Karcha, even those are yochid against the rabbim. So we bring a few other examples. Allah Shur and Karcha, yochid against the rabbim. Now this is a very interesting Tanu Rabban. We had something like it in Brachas. We'll have it in Chulin, in Nida. But Tanu Rabban, Hanishal lechacham. If something was asked to a chacham, betime, and he paskined lechumra, this is tamei. Lo yishal lechacham v'yita. Don't go to another rabbi and try to get a leniency, and she say it's tired. Or you went to a chacham v'asa. You went to chacham and he said this is asa type. Lo yishal lechacham. Don't go to another chacham and try another rabbi try to get a heter. Okay, now what? Now, why not? Why not? We had a story in Gemara in the Brachas. Mam is the very end of the Brachas. That the Chananya, who's the nephew of Rabbi Yeshua, was Ma'aber Chadoshim and Ma'aber Shanim in Chutzlarts. So the rabbis decided to send a delegation of 2 people to talk to him. So they went. As soon as he saw them, he was so impressed. And the 2 Talmid Chachamim, and they came from the Kohen dynasty. He said, "These are the greatest people I've ever seen." But whatever he said, they said the opposite. So he was Matai, they said Tambi. He's Matami, they said Tambi. Whatever he said, finally he got angry and he said, "You guys are terrible." And and why is he? And he says that I'm Matai and you want to be Machmir. Okay. But if I'm Machmir, you're Matai, what's going on? Didn't we learn that you're not allowed to a Chacham that asks you cannot be Matir? And then they said, because you have no right to paskin chutzlaris and so on and so forth. But he said, "Well, I'm the greatest guy, just like Rabbi Kiva." And they said, "True." The famous saying, they said, "Gediyim shehinachta nasa tiyoshim." The little kids that you were around in those days, and all those little kids, the big kids, and they're going to put you in chedim and the whole story there. So here we're talking about the person shouldn't ask another rabbi. They were talking about that a rabbi is not allowed to overturn another rabbi's fatwa. So what's going on here? Why not? I read 3 opinions in the Rishonim. 2 of the main ones, but the third one as well. One opinion is als covered hadishin, that the first Rav said something, you have to give him covered, and overturning what he said is a hebechah covered. The other opinion is once the Rav Paskin is treif, he has such a koyach that the thing itself became treif, so you cannot make it kosher. And the third opinion is like the Gemara says, it looks like shtei titus. One guy said it's kosher. We get everything from the same source. How can you come to the conclusion that it's Torah, and another guy comes to the conclusion that it's Tamei? It looks like we have 2 different Titus. Why do you? That's the 3 things. Mine has a lot of opinions on halacha. I'll just give you a few. One of them is, what happens if the Rav was matir? Are you allowed to then go to another Rav and he'll tell you that it's another Rav that comes along and says, "No, this is correct, this is asur." If the word is because he made a chaticha disura, then it's not shaykh. No chaticha heter is, if it's not asur, it's mutter. But if the word, according to most achrim, that'll go for some machlekes. But if the word is because covered the rishonim, second, can the guy change his mind? Can the original guy change his mind? If he made a chaticha disura, it's fatal. unless it's a Tabbat Bar Mishnah, unless he paskin wrong. But if it's a Shikol Das, first he thought, it looks like this is the halacha. And he made a Chatich Yisura. How can he change his mind? Even if he reads other rabbis, held garnished. But if it's as covered, he can change his mind to his own covered. Third, if the second Rav is a much greater Rav, a bigger Talmud Chacham than the first one. If it's as covered, it's not a state of covered because the other guys are much greater. But if it's Chatich Yisura, you can't. The problem was this with the one that's the thing that before. The Gemara in Brachas clearly says, and I didn't make up this chil, by the way, it's in the training. The Gemara in Brachas clearly says, Rabbi Chanina says, if I was matir and you were machmer, okay, so you are being you're being machmer. If I was aser, you makel, how can that be? So clearly it seems from there that you're allowed to go against the Rav if he was matir and you aser. So how can we say that if there's covered Rishonim, which is what many of the Rishonim say, that then matir you can be aser? How can that be? So unless they learn pshat Gemara there, he's not saying that you were right. He says, at least I can understand where you're coming from. You felt that it's aser, you felt that it should be aser, and therefore you said what you said. But if I'm asking, what's aser is that you come along, you're being matir, something to that effect. Anyway, we're in Gemara here of Zayin about give different cases here of with the halacha of Shur Kochim, those going against everybody. So first we learned is that you're not. Another interesting machlekes is what about? Is it only this piece of meat that the shaila was on? He said that this is treifin because of this and this thing. What about other animals that weren't asked from this guy but had the same issue? Does the Isa spread on that the Chacham can't overturn? If the vote is Chaticha the Surah is only on that piece. Everything else you can argue. If the vote is covered, he can't pass him the whole world. You can pass him what he's asked. But if it's covered, then it's everything. Another machlekes. Is it only also to the person who asked the question, or is it also on everybody? Shavia anaf sheikh hatichid asur. If you look at the lashon, Shavia anaf sheikh. I have a right to make. So is it on the chefter or is it on the gavra? What's the isur? Even if you hold that opinion that you made it asur, and what is the isur on the piece of meat, or the isur is on the person who asked the question? And that for you it is also because you came and submitted yourself to my psak. You came and asked me, so therefore it's binding for you. I just gave you fine enough from Israel. I think there's another one. I can't remember. I can't
say anyone who finds a meat that looks like this on this simon.
No, you can't ask the whole world. We'll give him a koyach. The mother said, "Right."
The same koyach to pass on one piece of meat.
Because you
same simon.
No, it isn't. You came, but you came and asked me a shayla, so therefore you're submitting yourself. You're makabel my psak. Then I'm makabel my psak. Maybe. Okay, what happened to two rabbanim? There were two rabbanim. You were asked at the same time, so it's not an issue of one first and second. The one guy said, "Tomer," I said, "Tomer, what do you do now?" Two rabbanim, two dayanim sitting within Yasa Shaila, and right away they both answered. One said yes, one said no. What do you do? Very interesting. What does minyan mean? How can one person be more people than another person? So most of the Shainim say minyan means b'shanim. An older person has more experience, but older means posher than the passport. Older means learned more years. It's not so clear. But one is, or others say minyan means he has more talmidim that he learns with, that he's able to discuss issues with, just like we have been made up over there. God will be men minyan, another person cannot overturn. Minyan there literally means number of people. And yeah, halech acharav. Then you go after that person. Otherwise, if you don't know what to do, you always go machne. Rabbi Shimon Karcha says, "Bishal teide halech acharav machne." If it's mehat teide, go after one's machne. Bishal seifrim halech acharav mekom. Halach Rabbi Shimon Karcha again. Am Rabbi Yosef hilchos Rabbi Shimon Karcha. And this is a cloud kol shas kul. Even though there's a big machlekes of shaynim, what happens if I could take the reasons right here as well. If there's a day in the Gemara and then there's an ikadami, so according to some of the shaynim, it falls under the same call. But if the shaylim mataydi machmim, rabani mekel. But according to Rashi, it's always the first one, not the second one, because the second one is always like a. And there's some who say azay, but the majority of people learn like the first way we learn. And we have certain rules. And we also have the rule, whenever Gemara says im tim tzolaimer, we have to have a series of questions and say, im tzolaimer, then we pass it like the im tim tzolaimer, because that's the way we seem to be going. Go to some shayim. Tell them I learn. We're talking about if he has a chava that you can trust him for terms of mice or that. Let's say a guy is a gane for nama orders. That's how Rashi learns it like it. The kulam shechozer behen a mekablis alamis. You never accept them again. Even if they do tshuva, that's it. They lost the credibility. We'll never trust them when it comes to mice and all these things. So the Gemara. Yehuda says, if they did tshuva but no one knows discreetly, then in the Kabbalah knows them. Because people, as far as they know, they're Amaratzim, they're Ganovim, I can trust. But for Hesi, if they openly do tshuva and they say we were Chotasi and I'm doing tshuva, then the Kabbalah knows them. We accept them, they turned a new leaf, new people. Igid Amari. Also, if they became a Ganov, whatever they did was Bahalten Hey, then the Kabbalah, they were Makabbalah. But for Hesi, if they did the Ravedas publicly, then Ein Mekabel my son. Then we don't, not Mekabel, as Rashi says, we don't really believe that Shuvah is complete. They're so brazen, they have such lack of shame. They do the Vedas in public, in defiance, we don't believe that Shuvah is complete. Now, Shuai Mekorcha says, no, Ben Kach, Ben Kach, Mekabel, every Yid we accept. Doesn't matter what Aveda they did and how they did it. Remember, it says, Shuv Banim Shavim, come back to me, you rebellious, wild children. The halacha is like that zug. So again, we just brought a few examples. The halacha of Shimon Koch. Interesting. We had it before. Rishon holds 3 days before and 3 days post. Also forbidden. Chachamim say lifnei a day in also, la'achar day mutter. The Chachamim say before their holiday is also, but post the holiday is mutter. Now, what's the chilul in the Chachamim here in the Tanakhama we had in the first Mishnah? I'm not even sure why it's two Mishnahs. But in Mishnah it's one Mishnah. Why in the Gemara should split up? It's mamish a hemshech of the Mishnah. Anyhow, Amar Tachlifa we had his Bavdime Amar Shmuel Yom Echad Rabbi Shmuel Lo'il Masa. That since Sunday is a pagan holiday, therefore you can never deal with goyim because 3 days prior, 3 days post, and a Sunday equals a whole week, 7 days. Now. Some of the Rishonim say we're talking about Amol pagan holidays. Others say this is talking about Kratzmach, the Noitzim. This is the holiday of the Noitzim, Sunday. I remember I might have a chance to look it up again, but Moshe talks about people who make weddings Simcha Dafka on Sunday, and he says it's verboten, it's totally awesome because it's a goyish holiday and therefore you take advantage. Even though others say you're not doing it because it's a holiday because nobody's working. Then it's easier.
Why is nobody working?
Yeah, the answer is what?
They should avoid doing Sunday. The whole goof that they're not working is because in Western countries they're used on the culture.
But nobody works on Shabbos either. So what is that? I'm used on Yiddishkeit. And we do all work on Friday. Yeah, of course, he used to. We had the blue laws in New York.
For recent generations,
the blue laws in New York were that Yidden who did not work on Shabbos are allowed to work on Sunday. That special had to work on Sunday. But Amol, if you wanted a job, if you didn't work on Shabbos, you didn't get a job. And Abnachal ever told me that every week he was fired because he never came in on Shabbos. Monday came to work, they threw him out. He had to find a new job every week. Rebbe once spoke about it was talking in the early years, where I think actually it's even before Toshin Yud, that a Yid once went to the Frierdiker Rebbe. In order to survive, there's no welfare, there's no unemployment. He had to push work to provide for his family. And unfortunately, he had to work into Shabbos. So he went to Frierdiker Rebbe and he asked the following question. That he comes home, whatever time he comes home, it's on Shabbos. It's always Mechal Shabbos. It's on Shabbos. He makes Kiddush. He wants to know if he's allowed to drink from his own wine because a Mechal Shabbos is Yain Nesach. He's allowed to drink from his own wine. And the Rebbe burst out crying. The Tmimus and unfortunately the predicaments that people found themselves in, they had to do this. So anyway, weiter. The Chachamim say, Lifnei edein aser, la'ach edein mutter. Chacham ein Tanakama. What's the chiluk in Chacham and Tanakama in the first Mishnah? So you might make a number of differences. Number one difference is hein beloy eday and ikebenai. Remember, we had a whole chakira. Was it 3 days before the Yom Tov or 3 days including Yom Tov? And that's the machlekes. Tanakama, so the Tanakama holds hein beloy eday because it says they clearly 3 days before. The Rabbanan, but so hein ve'eday. The Rabbanan don't spell out. All they say is aser. They don't say how many days, so therefore they hold that it's including the holiday. Number one. Another answer is Noser v'Noser Nikanai L'Poyel. Let me have a machlekes the Rabbi Yechon Lakish. What happens L'Poyel? If you did it, shouldn't have done business. Can you have hana from whatever you bought or the money? It's Tanakam b'Sava Noser Noser Mutter. You just said don't do it, but if you did it, it's Mutter. The Rabbanan b'Sava Noser Noser Aser. What's the lashon Rabbanan use? Chacham Zalifnei Dein Aser. That means that is forbidden, that the thing itself is asr. Number three, Iboy say Mishmuli Kebenayim. What does Shmuel say? Shmuel, the goyle ain't osel yom edom, and goyle, because we live amongst the goyim, is too hard, so difficult. So therefore, only on the holidays forbidden, but the 3 days before that doesn't apply. Tanakama East says clearly in the Mishnah, 3 days, and the Shmuel and the Rabban Basar less the Shmuel. They don't say it. You just say osel. They don't say how long, and they say it's not post. Boy, say the Nocham Hamadi Gemini. Another Nocham Hamadi. Tell you what's his Nochem Hamadai opinion? Nochem Hamadai, Nochem from Madai said, "Eino Aser Elayim Echad Lifnei Day." Even in Etzisrael, it's only Aser 1 day. Not you say 3 days, 1 day. Tanakama less later Nochem Hamadai says clearly in the Mishnah 3 days, and the Rabban Basra Eastlu the Nochem Hamadai. Rabban say Aser. How long didn't say? So we'll say they hold 1 day. Says he want to go for. Let's analyze Nochem Hamadai. But he says Eino Aser Elayim Echad Lifnei a day, and Omruleh Chama said some strong words. Nishtakeya Hadova V'Loy Nema. This should never be said again. And you should sink these things in and erase them because this is wrong, totally wrong. Why is it totally wrong? It says the Gemara. What do you mean? How can you say that? We just said that the Rabbanon in this Mishnah here hold like Nochem Hamadai. So what do you tell me in Maisa that is Takei Adov V'Loyama? Says the Gemara. Man Chachamim Nochem Hamadai. Who do you think the Chacham is? That is Nochem Hamadai. So he's agreeing with himself. But he shouldn't be said because he's a lone opinion, and he shouldn't say this opinion. The Gzedacham was 3 days, not 1 day. Now that we mention this, we'll bring a few other issues in the Machlekes and the Chamada, and each time we say the very strong words. It's not stam. We have a yochid against the Rabbah. They tell him, don't ever say this again. Don't even voice his opinion. Even a Kavim Mahalo, when he's putting a chedim over there, going to some, and he argued with Chachamim, nowhere do we say this word. This is a very strong language. Tanya learned another brayse. They will see in the end of this page a whole machlek is there, but you're not allowed to sell animals. You're not allowed to sell animals to a goy. Because if you sell animals, big animals to a goy, next time you will lend him and they'll work on Shabbos. It'll be your animal working on Shabbos, and that's forbidden. So then the machlek is regarding horses, because horses don't really do work. They're just mainly for riding. And if you say since the horse is for riding, the whole lease is only about anyway. So you can make a gzeda on top of a gzeda. Okay, so what about during war? During war, you're helping them out, giving them weapons and so on. So says the Gemara, Nochem says that during the war, you're allowed to sell them you're allowed to sell them a male zuz, zakein, an old one, different gives whether and an old one. No, both things are just zakein, an old one. The Muhammad during a war. Why? Because it's very rare that people will use these things, and therefore you're not going to then take the next step. If I can sell them a horse, the next thing they're going to do, because the horse themselves don't hurt anybody, and next thing you do, you'll sell them the big animal, and then you're going to rent them animals. But that's too far away. And they said to him again, what do I mean? Well, you can say the Kavasim say that said the same thing. That what you're allowed to sell a horse. It's none. Ben say the Mati Besus, Ben say the Mati about horse, and the reason I just told you. Because the horse is only also abundant anyway, and there was no issue. Gemara says, Ben say the loy mafli, Ben zochem lekeva, Ben say but it makes no difference whether the animal is male or female, whether the animal is old or the animal is young, right? He just holds that the horses are not included in the Gzeda. Because horses only awesome that are abundant to ride, and therefore we're not going to make another Issa, don't sell. Because maybe, next time we'll do it on Shabbos. But it's a the whole Issa on Shabbos, if your animal's on the abundant. But but he, that makes a difference between a Zocher and a Keva. No, but really horses generally are forbidden. It's only these kind of horses that are Zocher, who's Zokin, that it's a Milsel Shkicha, and therefore he agrees with Chachamim. That's totally different. It's Rabbanos for it. Well, the Rabbanos get over them. Rabbanos say if you follow the gods, it's totally wrong. That to allow a Zokin, all horses are us. We don't make exceptions. Tanya, another case, Hasheves, which is dill. Every plant when it's ready, when it's mlachton, that's when you have to give meiser. But dill, every part of it is being used. The seeds are being used, the actual shoots are being used, and the leaves are used. Every part of the dill is used. So therefore, it depends what your kavanah was when you planted it. That's when you give meiser, when that stage is ready. So Hamadi says Hasheves, when it comes to dill, misaser, it doesn't matter when you collected it, what stage of growing you collected it. You have to give meiser, the zera, the seed, the yedek, and the grinsen, and the shoot, the zidin. and zidin is I guess the leaves, or the yerek is the leaves, and the zidin is the shoots, or the stalk, the shoots. They say again, they say no, that it's not right. You have to wait till it's completely grown. Well, Ika, what do you mean? But Abelazar also agrees with him. Why you use so strong language? Okay, he's a lone opinion, but he's not the only one. But Abelazar, the same time, Abelazar, when it comes to the deal, mis asedes zera v'yerek v'zidin. So when it says, Hassan of Les is talking about Bigananusa in your own garden, you have a hobby farm or a little garden, that people have different kavanas when they plant the seeds. But when it comes to the commercial, it's mainly for the seeds to use for other things, and therefore you have to wait till it grows and it has ready starts. Yeah, after it's fully grown, you crush it and you may take out the seeds, so you have to wait till it's fully grown. Again, they told him. So Abacha felt very bad for Nachum and Modeh. This great man came from our place. He also came from Modeh, obviously. So Nachum and Modeh. And every time he voices an opinion, they tell him, no, you should never say that again. So what do you want from the guy? Can't open his mouth. Abai says, oh no, there's one case where we didn't say it. In fact, we even agree with him. Can we learn? Nochem Hamodai Oimer Sholem Tzrachim B'Shmei Tefillah. Shmoneh, you have a syntax, you have a format, but in Shemei Tefillah, if you have personal tzrachim, you're allowed to add it in, and that we pass on Nochem Hamodai. That doesn't that's not a Nochem at all. Bar Minodahi, that's not Nochem Hamodai. Take him off the table. The Talia Bashiravi is depending on big trees or on big ropes. The Tanya we learned Abelazar Oimer. Abelazar said, Shoyel Odom Tzrachim. We have a Machlekes Tanoim. So what's Nachum Hamodeh adding there? We have other Tanakh talking about it. And the interesting machlekes. Rabbi Lezer said, Shoyel Odom Tzrochav Be'achakach Nispal. Before Shmoneh, ask all your personal needs, and then daven to the Eibishter. Then it says, Tfilah Oni Ki Yativ, that the Oni, first of all, talks about himself, and all the things are wrapped around him, all his daigas. And then the Hashem Yishpei Sich, and afterwards, you tell Eibishter whatever he has to, know the Shmoneh. It says, so we know that means we know that's what it means tefillah. Rabbi Yeshua says, no. Rabbi Yeshua says, Yispal, first daven Shmoneh, and the achikachish, when you finish the entire Shmoneh, after, by the kind of tzor, then you ask your inyonim. It says, Eshbech lefon of Sichi, that I will first say, what the Eibishter had my conversation with the Eibishter, and then Tzorosi lefon about you. Then after I'll tell my personal inyonim. But okay, so these two opinions. We'll get back to Nachum Hamodeh in a minute. Because Nachum Hamodeh is not the here Nishaheni. Rabbi Nachum Hamodeh in Milush Manasseh and Shmei Tefillah, which is neither opinion. So first thing Hamodeh tries to explore these two opinions. But Abelazar Nami Haker will say what that you say it before davening. Say doch Eshbel von Sichi. Said first of all Sichi, then Tzorosi von Agad. Hochikomen. This is how we learn the pasuk. Eshbel lefon of Sichi. Know when I'm going to tell you this davening Manasseh? Bisman Tzorosi von Agad. When I already told you my tzoros first. First, you talk about the things that wrap around you, your personal issues. When are you going to tell the Eibishter all your yonim when you damage first? The truth matter, the both sukkim. You can learn either way, as you see. What's really going on here? What's the crux of their argument? So the Gemara first, a person should be misaded his shvach to the Eibishter, and then machach his pal, and only afterwards you should have. Benolan the Moshe Rabbeinu. It says Hashem Elikim Atach Shalosh. First he praised Eibishter. Eibishter, you showed us all your favor and everything else, and then after say ever know that is also favor. Do me a favor, I would like to go into this role. So he didn't daven ask his personal request till after first he praised Eibishter. Is Rabbi Yeshua? So Rabbi Yeshua hold the Alspinen and Moshe lives in Moshe. So first of all you say the entire Shmoneh, and then you go ahead. After Shmoneh, you go ahead and you ask your own inyanim. Rabbi Lezer Sava, lo yalfinu Moshe. We can't compare ourselves to Moshe. Shiny Moshe, the Rab Guvre. Moshe Rabbeinu was very, very great, and he understood what it means to praise the Eibishter. So his praises were taka praises. You remember we had in the Gemara Brachas, you can't just go ahead and say too many praises to the Eibishter because it's like in a way it's an insult when you tell the king things not enough. The Chachamim say, Chachamim say, neither one is right. So Nachum Hamodeh agrees with Chachamim. So he tells Abaye, what you said to me is a shracha consolation. Because whatever he said on his own, we knock him off completely. It's not fair. That's halacha. You ask Shemay Tefillah. Even though it says clearly you can ask all your general inyanim Shemay Tefillah. If you want to say the end of every bracha, whatever you want, you can say. You look in many Siddurim, and the bottom of Mishmanesset, it says on the bottom, in the Fe'enu, you can mispalim al chayil, you can even insert the name and do, and Baruch Aleinu, Parnasa, all these different things. Except now, we don't have this thing of adding things that are mentioned at all. But look at the last Siddurim, it says. I don't know. Is it our minig not to add the Fe'enu? No, that's. Was he ever shoyl in adding anything? I think Gemara concludes that you can't. The Gemara says it's better because it's more specific. Look at Chibarashi Amarav. Afa P. How in the world could Chibarashi say something named Rav? We did have two Ravashis. Even though we say that a person can ask his general yonish made tefillah, if you have somebody sick in your house, it's better to say it in a fe'enu. It is better to say it in the specific bracha that's meant for that particular purpose. Even though we say that the person can add Shmei Tefillah, but if after you finish, Sim Shalom, you want to add Afilu Keseda Yom Kippurim, even if you want to say Keseda Kippurim, you can say whatever you want. But really, middle Shmonesi, you shouldn't. This big machlekes, the Tur brings a machlekes. It's not brother Shmuel, but the Tur brings in Hilchot Rosh Hashanah a machlekes goinim if you're allowed to add Micha Moichin or Zachein or L'chaim, because it says it clearly that you should only add in the middle, not in the beginning. So how can we add? So they say you shouldn't be doing all these things that we do. They shouldn't be doing it. We who do say it. Why do we say it? Because we say there's a chiluk between tzarche yochid and tzarche tzibur, and because that's called tzarche tzibur, you're allowed to. Others say because that's not really a tefillah. Zochreinu and is not the same thing as the end when we say, ksei l'chaim tevim, or it's much stronger of a tefillah. This is more a general thing.
There's a it brings different pshatim, different parts of the
louder,
yeah. How do we have the shus? Yom Geroyim, you interrupt in the middle of Birchas Office. How can you do that? That's why they inserted this pisgam, Misoid Chachom and the Boilim, and it says Efter Chopid, Mitzvul and Sachalulim. Why? It's based on the Chachom and the Boilim. I'm not just interrupting.
Okay, very good.
Here. It's
very good. I think it's tough good pay base, if I remember correctly, the tour. Interesting tour. Okay, have a good day. We'll continue tomorrow, Mr. Shep.